Sonic Universe Issue 71 Reboot. Okay, I hope I like this arc. I always look forward to the reboot showing off an improved friendship between Sally and Nicole, but aside from the Crystal Cave story, I didn't see any improvement. I didn't even see if her organic form could eat, like I always assumed. So it's probably still a solid hologram or something. So there was no improvement with Nicole at all. I'm just glad it's focusing on these two and not all the horrible OCs working for Eggman. Like one that's in love with Eggman. I heard about a story like that, but maybe that was an IDW instead. We started out seeing Sally fighting some dark eye aliens with their way too close range weapon, while Rotor fires lasers, wanting to get them off the ship. I don't know what Big's trying to do. It's interesting that the text box name tag for Big the Cat just says self-explanatory instead of idiot, or even fisherman. Like they knew they weren't taking advantage of his character. For the most part, I think they could have not had him around at all for how much he's taking advantage of as a character. And Tails doesn't fare much better. This might be the most least taken advantage of Tails has been since Sad AM. At least there he caused sweet moments because Sally kissed him and read him a bedtime story, and he took down a whole factory by himself and smacked a tree branch into a camera bot. Here, he flew a few times. I still haven't progressed with the issue, but it's not like the plot is interesting right now anyways. I've seen the heroes fighting these things before. They just die in one hit, never injure anybody, even at this point, so I don't care. Sally almost falls off to her death, and Tails grabs her. It's impressive that we see Tails bruised. And the monsters disappear at sunrise when the sky is blue, not orange like it was when they could clearly appear earlier. Tails says T-Pup's gonna need repairs again. So again, more consequences, but not enough. I'm still bored. Rotor says the Sky Patrol needs repairs too, but I can't see why, so I don't care. He complains about getting up before the sun does, as the servant girl said she'll make them some coffee. That's what I might as well have called her. Oh god damn it, she can't even do that right? It turns out Rotor made his coffee machine too complicated, so she screwed up. I guess it wasn't her who was the idiot, just Rotor. Since when is Rotor an idiot? If he's smart, you'd think he'd make the interface really easy. Sally makes a pun, and fortunately she's called out on it. Can the actual plot please start? We didn't need to see them fighting at all. Not if barely anything happened anyways. Nicole actually points out that fighting the monsters was reckless because they disappear once the sun rises anyways. So she's definitely smarter than Sally here. She's thinking with pure logic. I'm used to Sally being smarter than Nicole. I don't know why one of the main characters of the cast is going to have only 2 times where she'll have distinct character moments. One in Crystal Cave, and the rest in this arc. That seems like a disappointing underutilization of her character. I think Rotor had more character moments. Most of the time she was stuck in the handheld form like it was Sad AM anyways. She should be adding that the Sky Patrol could have just moved. And if the reason Sally was fighting the monsters was because they'd attack people otherwise, because apparently they were that close to a civilization, then she got the idiot bowl by even complaining to Sally, because she should already know why she protects civilians. Even 2 minutes is enough time for a lot of people to get killed by those things. Sally says that's not like she could just watch and do nothing. Their fight was in the sky. They could, because they could just fly away. I didn't even know where it was. There could have been a text box on the first panel telling me what town the Sky Patrol was above. Telling me that there's actual stakes because the heroes lured them to them from a town. Sally drops her muffin, someone screams, and she asks Nicole what's wrong. And apparently Nicole's gone. Huh? Nicole had said something about Dr. Ellardy and disappeared. Tails says that Nicole isn't anywhere in their systems, but they're showing readings from the digital world, so that must be where she went. I guess she was kidnapped. There better be a logical reason for it, because it seems like a confusing surprise just to cause a plot. She's a hero. How evil is this person to kidnap her? Instead, Sally thinks that something must have happened to Dr. Ellardy. So, he's good? She wants to go check on his home on Isolated Island. I at first read that as Floating Island, but at least this is an original name. But Isolated Island is redundant. All islands are isolated. Rotor says that she could always jump back to the Sky Patrol systems, but Sally should get moving in case he's in trouble. Why don't I already know who Dr. Ellardy is? See, this is why there's no point in rebooting the comic for the clean slate thing. Because it's not a clean slate at all if I'm just plopped into another continuity 200 issues ahead instead of right at the beginning. How do you do a reboot wrong? Doesn't every reboot start at the start? We could have seen when Sonic rescued the king and liberated Mobotropolis in the reboot. We could have... I'd always assumed that every origin story for the Sadium characters in the reboot would come out around the same time as the first few issues of the reboot, not at the end. It's just more evidence that the writer didn't care about these characters. There's just too much evidence to be dismissed as a coincidence anymore. Because Nicole's not getting her origin story right until the comic's about to end. Like in Archie, we learned about her origin story the issue she was introduced. Sally says that the tornado will get them there the fastest, and asks the sense to tell Tails and Big to come with her. What the fuck? How the hell does Cream not know what the digital world is? Are you serious? What, was she born yesterday? She knows Nicole. Did she just meet her? That's pretty self-explanatory of a name, isn't it? This is about as bad as Sad M Tails having to be told by Sonic that SWATbots could roboticize him. She's 6, not 3. It's just insulting to the character and to the audience because it's so obvious there was a better way to explain this to us. We could have figured the digital world was an alternate reality when we saw Nicole's avatar walking around in a world of green squares, which isn't how the internet looks like. Obviously, if you really travel through it, you just see a bunch of electricity sparks, or Wi-Fi isn't even visible. She's just in a simulation like a video game. Nicole leaves the slide as panels just seem to be wasted on telling the audience stuff we should already know. Wow, that's horrible writing. No one knows where it came from. That's the worst world building ever. No one knows who invented it? Really? I assumed Rotor invented it at least. How would no one know? If this is a world advanced enough to have Nicole in it, it'd also have stuff like social media and government tracking. People would know who invented it. The inventor would brag about it. This is just one text box that hopefully will never be referenced again. It didn't need to be written. This is the most insultingly unbelievable attempt at creating a world ever. I'm interested in this plot, but come on! The writer clearly didn't think about how the world would make sense. Rotor says that the entire digital world might move like an invisible cloud, overlapping other systems. It might even predate computing as we know it. How does that make sense? That's dumb! That's like if shoelaces predated shoes. Wow. For the most part, the story has been written better than a typical Flynn story, but this is just dumb. We don't need a mystery over the digital world and how it could exist. Archie made more sense because we could have assumed Eggman made cyberspace. Wasn't that obvious? The smartest engineer in the world made the digital world. We see Nicole standing on a bridge, I guess as it's forming. Why wouldn't it have just been formed to start with? Or is she creating it? How in the hell does she know where to go? I just realized, that is so stupid. It's not like she saw a light beacon in the sky. She's not saying she's hearing something and following it. I assumed that she had been kidnapped and so she'd be with someone right afterwards that would be taking her somewhere. How does she know where to go? Wouldn't she just... If she can go back to the Sky Patrol at any time, wouldn't she have just immediately come back and not known what that was about? What is the likelihood that you would have gone to that particular part of the digital world that you'll end up going to, when she could have wandered aimlessly in any direction? She started out in a wide open space with no one to guide her. It's not impossible that she would have gone on the right path, because coincidences happen in real life, but it's sure as fuck an unlikely coincidence. Maybe she knows where she's going and she's trying to head over to Dr. Ellardy's computer. But again, why? It had been a while since the heroes had heard his name. Why would she have to memorize which path to take to find his computer? Wouldn't she be able to just go to it instantly through instant transmission? Like Wi-Fi waves do? Traveling through the internet like this is much slower. You'd think if she was all-powerful as the master of her own domain, she would have just flown through it as fast as her reaction times would allow. Not travel this inefficiently. She's supposed to be smart. Rotor expects me to believe that what they know about the digital world is more theory than fact. This is the definition of convoluted. I guess Nicole hasn't had enough time to fully explore it since they're all busy fighting Eggman. He thinks Dr. Ellardy's in trouble and called out through the digital world. So why didn't he simply send an email to Sally? Why panic her by kidnapping Nicole? Wouldn't the freedom fighters be flooded with emails because they're famous heroes? They probably have to hire someone, like Cream. It could be explained that that's why he didn't send them an email, because it'd take forever. Wouldn't make more sense if he just summoned Nicole to him? He thinks Nicole might be the only one who could help. And we see what I guess is black computer virus programs threatening a man in cyberspace. So, he's a digital program too? She wastes time telling the monsters to get away from him, and they could have attacked her while she was saying that. Why did she think that would work? She summons a cool-looking pink weapon to attack them, as I hope we'll actually be told why they're there. I feel like the Dark Guy monsters. They certainly have their lack of reasons for doing anything. She reaches her hand out to him and says it's been a long time. Is he her creator? You know, because Rotor being her creator would be too simple. Oh my god. Pender has had a better idea. Rotor's a genius engineer, and the only one we knew who was with the freedom fighters at the time. Of course he made Nicole. Of course he had an idea for her even when he was a kid. But no, Rotor can't be too competent. Even though it'd be heartwarming to see them have an actual father and daughter dynamic of some kind, because now they'd be in a universe where Rotor would know he made Nicole. So we'd finally see that plot thread resolved from Archie by seeing how they react to at least knowing that Rotor made her. Like, this is unnecessary. You don't need to make a new character with a forgettable design just to be Nicole's father. She's not organic. Any brilliant programmer could be her father. But instead Big says that Dr. Ellardy's her father. And Tails reminds us that he's the guy who made the Metropolis Grand Archive, which has information on just about everything. Just call it the internet. It's not hard. Just keep things simple. I vaguely remember learning that this arc was written by someone other than Flynn, like Eva or something? Or maybe that was the artist. Or maybe it was an IDW. Well, this is definitely written like it's by Flynn. Convoluted writing that just annoys me. I thought the Eggnet was the internet of this world. I guess it makes more sense there be two internets and one is restricted by Eggman. Also, another baffling problem is that the art isn't illustrating what Sally is saying when she says that Dr. Ellardy was the inventor of her ring blades. That's what they're called? I never would have imagined that. They're blue, not yellow. Logic would dictate Rotor would have made those ring blades for her. That's probably what I assumed, but that'd be too simple. That'd be streamlining things. And he was the Kingdom's lead researcher and developer for computer technology. You know, as opposed to Uncle Chuck. Because he's a Sadie M character, so God forbid he get any respect. We gotta have this brand new OC who didn't need to exist instead. There's a reason Chuck was the science advisor for the King and Archie. He was the only brilliant, good engineer that we already knew about other than Rotor. So he was used as a Chekhov's gunman. It'd actually make even more sense if he made Nicole, because he's older than Rotor. But that required logic and going with the simple, obvious idea, instead of making an extraneous OC and expecting us to be attached to him right away. Pander's had better writing sense than this. He's the creator of the roboticizer, but not Nicole and ring blades, oh no. Because that would make him look good, instead of screwing things up. Well, I'm glad that so far none of the characters have tried to outright tell us that Chuck's not Sonic's uncle. Aside from a shitty name tag text box calling him Uncle to many, and Rotor calling him Uncle, but that's about it. And it could be assumed that he's still his uncle, and saying he's not based on those things is looking too deep into it and being pessimistic. So maybe people only think he's not his uncle anymore because Flynn said so, and Flynn made like 200 continuity mistakes in Archie. It's like how I expected to be told that Snively wasn't Eggman's nephew anymore, but I wasn't. So as far as I'm concerned, he is his nephew. Rotor calling him uncle can be justified because his father sucked, so why wouldn't he think of him as a new parental figure? He could have gotten Sonic and Chuck's permission to call him his uncle. Doesn't mean he's not Sonic's uncle when he's clearly a blue hedgehog like him. Sally says that Dr. E's ring research started after he retired. That makes even less sense. He wouldn't be allowed to keep doing research after he retired? Why did he retire then? When Nate Morgan researched rings, or rather crafted them to hold chaos energy, he had to do it in a lab environment, and there was an explosion because he made the wrong decision. That felt more realistic. It's called chaos energy. It can't be tamed that easily. We cut to the past, where the weird-looking guy with Nicole-like ears shakes hands with the king, getting ready to leave in a boat in a couple hours. I guess he has a long car ride to the boat if he thinks a couple hours means he'd better be on his way right now. The king is sad to see him go, saying he's done so much for the kingdom, and wishes there's something he could do. He's nice, but I'll never forgive that stupid redesign. Dr. E says he needs a fresh start because there's too many memories here. That doesn't explain it. He's talking as if he's not retiring from necessity from old age, which would be the common sense, simple assumption for anyone to make. He's talking like he's leaving this place because he went through something traumatizing. I have an idea in my head of what the spoiler reason for that is, because it got spoiled. But I don't see why that would justify it. If anything, wouldn't he want to stay here even more? I refuse to buy that he wouldn't want to be a regular part of Nicole's life if he's basically her father, if he's portrayed as a good person. Because she'd be all he has left. It'd be like a guy losing his daughter, and then having another daughter, and refusing to be a father to her. He goes to a young Sally and says that at first he wasn't sure what to do with Nicole, which connects directly to the internet to explain her vast knowledge finally. But now he wants to randomly give it to Sally on a whim, as opposed to simply keeping her, like would make more sense. The reason Nicole's creator gave her up on Archie was that he was in a peaceful future and knew she was needed to help the freedom fighters in the past. The reason she had to be given up by her creator in Sadie M's continuity is that Sally's mom made her and died of childbirth somehow, so she's a family heirloom. I always assumed that Nicole was given to Sally by Sally's father in the reboot. And I even said that in one of my Sadie M reviews. But that keeps things simple. But God forbid that happen. He's handing the world's most powerful computer to a 5-year-old. Good thing he knows she can be trusted. What if she broke her? She's happy that the computer can talk and know her name, and she asks for the computer's name. And apparently, the inventor of anything, let alone the best computer, didn't think to give it a name, even by this point. Based on what I remember hearing, I'm shocked they didn't just name her what he wanted to start with. Then the king decides to name her Nicole after a long past queen. Okay, the queen was called Nicole in Sadie M. I think I prefer that origin for a name now. It made actual sense that the name was thought of as opposed to the king thinking of some random queen's name from a long time past. Is Nicole a name that would have existed back then? I guess it is another planet, but it still comes off as less believable than it being a modern name, because it's Nicole. The king has been barely used as a character. It's like he might as well have not been brought back at all. It's like it was just there for cheap fan service, and he didn't really care about him, because he was used a lot more by the other writers, even if not particularly well. Then the present, Nicole helps Dr. E up because he digitized his consciousness and got trapped out here investigating a problem. Without any ray gun or anything to save himself. He had done it before just fine. He says that he came across this distortion, wandered, and he thought he knew how to get back, but there's a blockade now. Wouldn't anybody ever be able to immediately get home from the digital world with the press of a button? Or a thought? How stupid do they think I am? He says that he could send out a call for help, but then why didn't he just have the ability to go home from the press of a button? He could have said he came in here through a magical portal that showed up from chaos energy overflow, and that make more sense than a distortion. Who would go in one of those? She says that she chose her physical form for herself, and gets rid of the blockade for him. The heroes land on the island with a stupid name, and Tails says there's supposed to be a lake of rings here. You know what? I miss knowing why there's a lake of rings in a place. I miss knowing about Nate's ring generator. I miss knowing that Chuck made a power rock. This just feels like a Deus Ex Machina because there's no explanation. It's bad enough there's one lake of rings in Meropis, but that made some sense because there were Chow there, so their chaos energy would have invigorated the lake. There better be Chow here too. Dr. E only started researching the rings once he moved and discovered them here, and when he sent her the ring blades, it was the first time they'd heard from him in years. It really feels more contrived than that he sent the ring blades to her instead of Rotor simply making them. An interesting twist, though not that creative since we already saw in Neutral Badniks working for Breezy, the Motobug offers to help the heroes, telling them to follow them. And since Big Surprise can talk, that proves it's very different from a normal Badnik. And even if it was a bad idea to trust it, since Eggman could make his Badniks be able to talk anyways, like at the start of Archie, they would have gone to where it'd tell them to go anyways from exploring the island. This just made things faster paced. I guess this Motobug is a nice nick that Dr. E took over. Seriously, Uncle Chuck has barely been used in this reboot. I thought he'd be much more of a regular character because that was common sense based on what things were like before for the last 2 decades. We could have had Chuck on the Sky Patrol instead of Big the Cat. This arc was the perfect time to use Chuck more, and they failed. I would have thought it was awesome if Chuck was the one who reprogrammed this. A lot of people don't like Big the Cat. I don't think Chuck has any haters. Tails says that's just a pre-recorded message. Okay, that is creative, because we already saw a Badniks able to actually talk in Archie. So they follow his pet Motovug to his house where he wakes up, having been under some energy ring-shaped things trapping him. You'd think if he catapulted up like that, he'd electrocute himself from contact with them. But that makes sense. I thought he went in through a distortion he randomly wandered into, not an invention he made. And I don't understand why he has a headache. It makes sense if he didn't, like I assumed he would. Well, I like that naturally he's dehydrated after all those hours. So Sally immediately is considerate enough to tell Big to get him some water. Dr. E's stunned to learn that Nicole can present herself in a solid form in the real world. And Sally gives him some broth. Yeah, just broth. Not even chicken noodle soup. It'd be more interesting to know which type of soup it was. But that would require the writer to go look at cans in his house and decide which one to name the soup after in seconds. It's a minor thing, I know, but I'm looking for all of the problems. It's good that she was considerate to him and that she got thanked by him. Then he hates the broth because she added some herbs from the potted plants in there. And she explains that she doesn't get to cook much with Cream and Antoine, the Sky Patrol. So for the first time in ages, Sally's inability to cook comes back. At the worst time. I didn't think she'd manage to screw up giving someone dehydrated some soup. Wasn't it common sense not to take this risk now? You'd think she would have checked with him first. That's what I would have done. I think this is the 9th idiot bowl. It is a good idea to have her being bad at cooking actually inconvenience her with no benefit to it, so it's an actual flaw. Not like when she made bad pancake batter just for it to be used as a Chekhov's gun. And she didn't even get embarrassment much anyways because she wasn't told that the soup was terrible here. And she totally buys it when he says it's bracing. At least in Archie, she knew her pancake batter sucked, and what exactly she did wrong. At least it's explained why the Nice Nicks are here. Eggman left him behind after some failed operation out here. That's stupid. He would have had them designated to be scrapped so he could reuse their metal for free. He wouldn't just leave them behind. This was stupid in Archie too. It would have made sense if they had been sent here so Eggman could try to attack, and then they got repurposed, and I guess Eggman decided not to bother trying to destroy them when he could just leave them alone and deal with them much later would make sense. He's busy. There's plenty of other tasks he could have had ordered to be done than trying to have rogue Badniks destroyed when the Badniks harmlessly stay on one island. It makes sense if he didn't willingly leave without them, and thus force himself to spend money on metal later, and instead they were sent to attack in his absence. Then he could have feasibly gotten distracted and assumed they were salvaged by the heroes and used by the time he would have thought about retrieving them. So the assumption I went with was better than the explanation I got, so it shouldn't have even been written. He says interestingly that the Nice Nicks help him with the chores, and he uses them to monitor the island. It'd be nice if they were called Nice Nicks in the story. Would that be a smart play on the name of a game concept? And apparently only SDC is smart enough to do that. Sally made a pun earlier. You're telling me she won't call them Nice Nicks right away? They also help deter the Dark Gaia monsters. Dr. E says that he doesn't understand why the ocean itself hasn't poured itself off the edge. He sent some of his robots out to investigate after the world split up, and with some of the footage he received, the water just stops, and then there's nothing but a clouded abyss. Sally just says it's magic, even though Nicole hates the excuse, even though it's a fantasy world where she should be used to magic. And besides, once she had been told by Sonic that Rhoda figured it all out, she should just tell him Chaos is doing this. Also, am I forced to assume that Chaos is keeping the atmosphere from flying away too? Even though he's the god of water and destruction, not air? It was common sense to have Rhoda explain that too, especially when he thought to have Sally ask how she can still breathe. Nicole wants to discuss something with him, but then he arbitrarily refuses and wants to lie down because he's still not feeling well. I sense unnecessary padding coming up. He could lie down and discuss. He tells Sally not to trouble herself with considerately helping him, and tells Nicole they can talk later. Nicole finally asks if she's been upsetting him to Sally, who reassures her with a logical excuse. He's had a rough day, she's changed a lot since he last saw her, And he'd naturally be distant because he's been living all alone for a while. I guess he grows his own food and imports his toilet paper from the internet. Nicole says that she thinks someone deliberately attempted to prevent him from leaving the digital world. No shit. I wonder if it's Eggman. He was trying to use the digitizer to troubleshoot a problem with the reprogrammed Nicenix when he was stranded in the digital world. That doesn't make any sense at all. Why would he think it would troubleshoot them? Why not just go hook the Nicenix up to a computer directly and reprogram them with the computer? Like, would be obvious. If they're too dangerous to bring to his computer, like, fire a ray gun at them. Buy a ray gun. Oh, let me guess. The Nicenix will become evil again to pad out the arc with a really easy action scenes that's so easy it's pointless. While almost all the ways they were nice will have merely been told to us, not shown. It's so obvious to be more interesting to see them be nice at this point in a variety of ways. I'm guessing Eggman wants his Nicenix back, but what took him so long then? Nicole thinks that whoever placed the barricade might have been led back here, and we see that person spying on Nicole, and he looks unnecessarily creepy, like a shadow with an animal mask on and glowing yellow eyes. This is like a mask from Pokemon. And ends the story finding Nicole fascinating. It'd be more interesting if it was the only villain, and Eggman wasn't in fact the villain, and had nothing to do with this. And a text box calls it The Ghost in the Machine. Yep, the story's by Ian Flynn, although the script was Alea Baker instead. Why do they have the plot and script be written by separate people? Anyways, the story reveals that Nicole was made not by the obvious Rotor or Chuck, or even by the King, making him smarter and have more character depth, but instead by some random new OC who didn't need to exist. Because fuck getting Chuck to do anything awesome. So this Dr. E, who wasn't even the one who named Nicole apparently, was trapped exploring cyberspace because of a bad guy, because he somehow thought he needs to go into cyberspace to troubleshoot his Nicenix, instead of simply hooking them up to a computer and going over the programming the normal way. Blasting them apart. We also have the bullshit revelation that no one knows who created the digital world. Yeah, who knows who created the internet? Nobody can just Google that. If it's a magical separate dimension, just call it a magical separate dimension, and have portals bring people there. The computer virus could just be a magical monster. This wasn't about Sally and Nicole's friendship at all. They were separated most of the time after Nicole was dragged into cyberspace and magically knew exactly which path to take by coincidence, which let her save Dr. E just in time, rather than just instantly teleporting to him after he summoned her. Needless to say, this plot is hard to believe. I better pick up soon. It's interesting. Glad it stars Nicole and Sally. That's probably why it's so interesting. At least it took until the shitty world building for me to stop taking it seriously. So it was unusually good up to that point.